Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome to the Raising Cain Show. We're excited tonight. We're going to have on Brian Long, a remarkable innovator whose impact spans from saving lives through his innovation to revitalizing American industry. As the chairman of the American Industrial Compact Consortium, Brian brings unmatched expertise in defense innovation, semiconductor manufacturing, and workforce development. He's going to share some insights tonight on how his contributions have shaped multi-billion-dollar industries and how the CHIPS Act can transform the U.S. semiconductor sector, something that definitely needs to happen. In fact, this is so critical to national security, and we're going to get into that tonight. So I'm really excited to have him on, and we're going to get into a lot more of that. But what we're going to do so that we don't disrupt our conversation tonight, I'm going to run our commercials now and get those out of the way. So folks, stick with us. We'll be right back after a short message.
It says, I woke up this morning and looked out the door to a country I don't recognize. They put masks on our face to hide our pain, and there's no fire in most people's eyes. And it's still true today. It's still true today that they've tried to destroy the American spirit. And in some instances, they've done a dadgum good job. But in other instances, they have lit an inferno in some people. And we right now are gathering some of those people that are on freaking fire to save this country.
Increasing expenses have caused us all a lot of pressure these days, and it's affecting even the wealthiest of people. Most have lost their sense of security, stability, and even hope for a strong financial future. The game plan of everyone in your cell phone has likely been disrupted or even hardcore stopped, and most are looking for a creative solution to regain financial momentum. Oftentimes, life's best solutions are the simplest. But first, a question. What is something most people think they should own but don't? Crypto, fine art, real estate? Nope. We are talking about real money. The kind kings and queens fought for and large institutions today buy in mass. We're talking about gold and silver, assets that provide confidence in tough financial situations. So the question is, do you own any? If you don't, you're not alone. Most people aren't maximizing the power of precious metals because it's just been too complicated. And even though they see advertisements about gold and silver daily, they don't really know who to trust. That is, until now. The bottom line is that buying gold and silver doesn't have to be complicated or scary. There's a simple, better way to accumulate assets and create financial peace, headache-free. And this very minute, A new community of average people are seeing above average results to the tune of tens of millions in assets over the last few years. This system is tested, it's simple, and it's not an experiment. To date, it's helped more than 80,000 people bring hope back into their lives. It's invitation only. And right now, this new community has accepted a challenge to give away as much free gold this year as possible. Curious? Learn how to get your free gold today. Check out the next step to get the details.
Welcome to Shop with America, where the emphasis is on America. Our movement is to switch away from your shopping with the big box stores and the mega corporations back to supporting family-owned, made in America. We've been giving these big box stores our money every day for years. But what's happened is they've forced many small businesses to shut down. We call this the illusion of choice. We see all these products in these stores, but in reality, it's only a few companies that control it all. There are thousands of lawsuits for health damage because they put profit over our people. But there is another choice. We found a better way. There's a family-owned American factory with product integrity and have always done things the right way for the right reasons. And this company outperforms the big box stores. That's due to their month-to-month shopping club. They make everyday consumer products that we all use and buy again and again, like toothpaste, shampoo, coffee, and organic beef. Go to shopwithamerica.us today.
Welcome back to the Raising Cain Show. And with us tonight, we have a wonderful guest, Brian Long, an accomplished American industrialist, designer, and inventor, as well as the chairman and founder of the American Industrial Compact Consortium based out of Hazard, Kentucky. Brian, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, Nate, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. Let me know if you can hear everything okay.
Yep, I can hear you great. And want to start off, I guess, by asking, so can you share your journey as an industrialist and inventor? How did your work evolve from designing life-saving technologies to revitalizing U.S. industry? Maybe that's a good place to start.
Well, thank you, Nate. To begin with, I think whenever you're looking at when did this start, I think it began out of necessity. And I did serve in the military. And back in the 90s, we had a lot of, the Bosnia conflict and all of that. And when we had a lot of mines that were showing up on the side of the roads with farmers stacking them up, like waist high, everybody's concerns went up about what's going to happen to troops that's transporting back trucks. And back in that day, we had the folks over in Fort Lee that were giving you a pathway to the Army Ideas and Suggestions program. So I started designing different things to add on to trucks. And next thing you know, I've got this module that you put on the back of trucks, an armored module. And of course, all of that just kept going and going. And I started integrating other things in my spare time and found little gaps of time in my duty to actually start becoming a field applications engineer in essence. They didn't have a job for that, but I was taking it upon myself to do it anyway. So, Nate, and later on, people come up and said, well, that's hillbilly armor. And that's, that kind of term came about because of people like me. And so I kept on doing what there was openings for. There was nobody saying there's an opening for this in the military, of course. But if you really want to save lives, you do things in those little gaps of time of necessity. And so that led on. And then later, after I retired out of the Army, I started working for some defense contractors, raised some money, built the module, came back and found out that the Russians stole my idea and they made them for their spasnauts. And so I'm going, okay, I guess that's the best compliment you could get is when somebody's copying your work. And so I later I got invited to work in for the military doing counter IED and counter bomb mitigation strategies and survivability systems and vehicles. And I was working with the U.S. Army's Rapid Equipping Force. And during that time, this is in the early 2000s, and there was the phrase was "stop the bleeding." And when you're doing something like that, it's not really about the money anymore. It stays with you for the rest of your life. Your decisions you make in every angle of the armor and everything that you do, and the human factors engineering and what you're doing to make a first order prototype, it stays with you. And there's no, and I'm gonna, I'll say this: there's no amount of money, there's no position, there's nothing of this earth that can rid you of the decisions you make to engineer something to where those troops get into the vehicle, and you want them to know that somebody put some thought into this. And then later, of course, we had the explosive form penetrator came about, and I designed the armor that went on said MRAPs, and Senate and the House went crazy over that and said it couldn't be done. And I had like 9 months to do it for, design it for the whole fleet. Of course, they built the entire package for the fleet, and that went out to, I don't know, 20 something thousand vehicles. And then later it turned into a yard sale in Afghanistan. So for many years, I'd get up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, just looking at the TV and going, my God, I hope everybody's okay over there. And so whenever you get the responsibility of doing something like that, you better pray to the good Lord. You better pray to God that you are given the right answers to the test. And I was surrounded by lots of wonderful people at the U.S. Army's Rapid Equipment Force back in that day. I will invoke Dr. Bruce Jetty's name. He was the guy who invented the Rapid Equipment Force. And we had the gyro element. It was working with us all the time on these vehicles. And, after you do something like that, you move on to the next level. It's like, okay, what do we have to do now? And when you start talking about complex systems, you realize that the semiconductor industry is the center of that. It is the center beating heart of everything we do in peace and in war. And it's the center hub of the wheel of industry. And every spoke of that wheel of industry, whether it's aerospace, bioengineering, or I shouldn't even say bioengineering, but I should say ag and bioscience, medicine, everything depends on semiconductors and microelectronics. So whenever you're looking at, your life of service and what you do, and you realize what the ramifications are if you get it wrong. In this case, example for the nation, all the bickering we're seeing that's happening right now in the country, people sniveling and whining over this or that, we better stop the movie right now, and we better focus on getting this right. Because I can tell you, and I've been through this a million times, so you can play it like a chess game. We're going to end up, we're going to either use these and start building our country back, building back our fabs and our semiconductor industry, or in the future, we can actually hand these to our kids. We can hand those to our kids and tell them to go to the e-wastelands and start picking apart chips off of old breadboards.
Yeah.
That's our two decisions we've got, honestly. And I've spent the past, I don't know, 8-9 years creating a consortium that the Chinese have attacked. They attacked my website. They attacked me. They attacked my bank accounts. So I know I'm over the target. And to you Chi-Coms out there, I'd like to give you, a thank you for compliment of attacking me like you have. Because it tells me I'm doing this right. And great company with folks like you, Nate.
This area, I don't think most Americans fully appreciate or understand just how important the semiconductor industry is to the United States. This is a problem that we see, from a strategic standpoint. Right now, we look at Taiwan, and we've had this, basically agreement with Taiwan to protect them, mainly because of semiconductors. And the problem with China, and what people don't understand with China's industry, and there's things that I can't even talk about, I'm sure that you can't talk about, things that I've seen in 27 years of working in cybersecurity, things that in having to do with supply chain issues, and it's almost always related to semiconductors, where we have found, and I'm trying to think of how I can say this without getting too much in the detail. Let's just put it this way. There have been things that have happened where there have been massive purchases by our military of equipment that had to be scrapped after it was purchased because it was found out later that the Chinese had some tiny little semiconductor chip that was on some board, and it started basically, pinging back to China the moment it was turned on. And that is a real threat, and it's a real problem. And it's one of the reasons why nowadays, one of the things that we're very concerned about is where are we getting, our supply chain from? It's a huge problem. It's a big cybersecurity problem. It's something that I think everybody in the industry understands. I think the politicians on Capitol Hill, I think they understand. But I also know that there are decisions that get made oftentimes for political reasons that basically override, the current laws that are on the books. And I've seen this with software development. I've seen this with semiconductors. And I'll give you one example. There's a lot of talk about TikTok and the threat of TikTok, because of it being, having a parent company in China, and the threat of capturing and collecting, people's information and all of this. But I'm just as concerned about American companies that utilize Chinese software developers, as part of their supply chain. I'm just as worried about American companies that want to get into, they want to be able to sell their products in the Chinese market. And so they go and they send, companies over there to go build technology. And the Chinese are notorious for stealing that technology. Or maybe they want to get access to those Chinese markets. And so maybe they're willing to share a little bit of their data with the Chinese. All of these things concern me. And so having our own semiconductor plant here in the United States, I think, is a critical strategic necessity for national security. Can you elaborate on that and just what some of the problems that you've seen in the past with such a heavy reliance on places like Taiwan, Philippines, and some other places, and why we need to explain for our guests, because a lot of people that are on the show right now may not understand the depths of that, and why have we not done this before? Why did we allow semiconductors to be offshored, and why is it so important that we bring that back here to the United States?
Okay, well, we have to walk that dog back through the park in the days of Clinton and San Diego, the port of San Diego. We have to walk this dog way back. And the EPA, environmentalists, and they began this whole, they set up this church around environment, and they turned it into a giant money grab. And, in the 70s, Nate, I mean, I think I might be older than you, but I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And I remember, but I remember when there was a car battery issue. Remember that in the 70s? They had this car battery. Well, car batteries are being left out in the yard, left in big piles in the junkyards, and were permeating into the earth. And okay, so we had that problem back then. And so that was the beginning of the itch that they couldn't scratch until they got to here in 2025, where you can't even drop a bubblegum wrapper on the side of the road without them making a Superfund site and having to dig up, like mountains of dirt to make sure that bubblegum wrapper was gone. In some cases, this is extreme, but the environmentalist was a protagonist of this. And they would go out here against companies, chemical companies, that we need to make said semiconductors and microelectronics. And in the days of Texas Instruments in the 70s and 80s, okay, when we first started getting computers on people's desks, I was a board draftsman back in the 80s. And I was working for an archaeologist. His name was Ronald Wyatt, and I was doing Noah's Ark stuff. And whenever, back in those days, when the computers came about, we had the floppy disk, everybody was going, oh my gosh, what's this going to do to the land, and while they're looking outside at the car batteries. And so this became a runaway train with no brakes. And so all of these really great companies like the DuPonts, BASF, 3M, they all got viced down to where they could not function. And what did they do? They had no choice but to move overseas. It's either that or get fined and fined and fined and fined. And I would like to know, can we doge the history of who got that fine money from these companies? And because I can tell you right now, we need those companies back in the United States. So we regulated all of the big companies out of here. They all took off and went overseas. Malaysia, Taiwan, China, they're gone. Okay. And that did not make them traitors to the United States. It made them survivors. Now, did the Chinese come back and start turning the United States into a giant, espionage network? You're darn right they did. And they're everywhere. Okay. So now we're in a situation where you have to onshore the industry back to America. Now, the CHIP Act, we started making the language for that back in Trump's first administration. And it kind of got rolled into the NDAA, and then it turned into something else. And we kind of muddled it through until the days of Biden. And then presto, it became a law. And when it became a law, we went and got Gina Raimondo, and she went and got a bunch of people and put Burger King hats on them and stuck them in NIST. And then they went around picking favorites about who is going to do things in the chip world. Now, what this did to the United States, it basically turned the country into a temporary technology parking lot where these companies would come in and make deals. They would set up for as long as the deal was good. And if one thing got in their way, environmental issue or whatever, they would pull pitch and they would be out of there. They would leave. And would leave these big husks. And for the time during the Biden administration,
That's a Freudian flip.
Yeah, it works. Okay. But during that time, all these small and mid-sized companies were coming up to the bat, and they were going, we've got a small company here in America. We can do this. And they're submitting their applications to the folks over there in commerce. And they were throwing all of this effort into a black hole of which they never, ever, ever intended on committing to. I believe that they had as much love for the small and mid-sized businesses as I've got for a kick in the head. And so that's what happened over in that regime. And I know this because we won some deals across the country. And the minute these things happen, either because of political reasons or regulatory or just business, when you're talking about a $2 billion deal, you've got to raise a lot of capital to make that, erect out of the ground as a fab. And so, where we're at now, we have to pull a full stop on the nonsense because the CHIP Act is already a diseased temple, and I don't know what they've done with the money. I don't know who got what. It's so hard from day to day. I mean, there was people over in different states that were professing they're going to get CHIP Act money for a server data center. And the CHIP Act itself was designated to onshore the industry back to America like what we did during the days of the Marshall Plan.
Right.
Okay. So the Marshall Plan, we rebuilt 100 countries. You would think, hey, we can do this for America, right? Like the days of Andrew Carnegie, when they brought the steel industry back to America. And you think, well, Andrew did it, and he didn't even know how to read when he showed up in America. And he learned how to read, started a business, and onshored a whole steel industry. We're sitting here trying to run this technology race, and we can't tie our own shoes. And it's because of the politicians getting involved. And when they don't understand the science, they don't understand anything about it, they're going to say things like, oh, sure, we can do a data center for CHIP Act money. And you can't. And I hear that in a lot of halls. I'm going, that money is not supposed to be used for a data center or a swimming park or whatever, So,
that brings up a good point. I want to just touch on that real quickly because, there has been this massive push to move everything to data centers and to concentrate all of our server technology and all of that in the cloud. And, for people who maybe haven't been around that long, it seems like a great idea. But I got started in the industry back when everything was mainframe. And
oh yeah.
So and they moved everything out, to basically they spread everything out away from the mainframe because there were inherent risks at having everything centralized, at having one place where you could attack and get the data, destroy it, all of that. The funny thing is now we're moving away from that. We're going back to a centralized model. It's different, but it's the same concept. We're going to save money because we don't have to have a bunch of servers everywhere. We can just have them up in the cloud. We can provision a new server up in the cloud, no problem. And my concern is, and I go back to this because I look at who runs the cloud services. It's Amazon Web Services, it's Google, it is Oracle. You've got, of course, Microsoft. When you go and look at, and it's not easy to find because you can only find data that's like maybe a couple of years old.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go and you look at H-1B visas and people who are coming to this country to work for technology companies from foreign nations, and in particular China, you see that like 90% of the Chinese nationals that are working in America under H-1B visas are working for Google, they're working for Microsoft, they're working for Oracle. Those three companies, I think, are the top three. And it's like, and so the bulk of them. So even if we bring things back here, one of the things that's critically important is making sure that we keep Chinese spies out of these companies. And so this is and that's why I was bringing up the thing earlier about TikTok and all of this focus by, because at the end of the day, it's a great talking point for politicians. But if they don't understand the reality of the threat, and they don't, so what I see happening is the CHIP Act, what it was meant to do was to bring our supply chain back to the United States for semiconductors. But now they're like, oh, hey, we can build a data center, with that money. No, that's not what it was designed for. That's not. Look, there are data centers out there already, and you building another one is not going to solve the problem that we're having with supply chain on these semiconductors. In fact, you can go down right now to Best Buy and turn over every laptop that is down there. And I've done this. And because I had a job that it was a rush job. It was a contract that I had. And it was working on something. And I got to leave some of the details out, but it was not a classified job, but it involved China, and was part of the threat in this job. And so I didn't want a bunch of Chinese equipment, but I had to go buy some new computers because it was going to require a team of people. And I went down to Best Buy and I needed it like yesterday. So I didn't have time to wait and do it through some sort of procurement through, Dell Federal or something like that.
Right.
But I went down to Best Buy and I start flipping over, the laptops, and every single one said made in China. And so I'm asking the guy, he's like, looking at me like I'm, retarded or something. He's like, well, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking to see where this is made. And so I just said, look, so far everyone I've looked at is made in China. Do you have anything in here that is not made in China? It can be made anywhere else, just not in China. And so he finally found, dug through his system, and he found he had a couple of laptops that were made, I think, in like Thailand or something like that. And then some other ones, that was one brand. And then another brand had one model that was made in the Philippines. I said, all right, I said, how many do you got? I'll take them all. And so, and that's the kind of problem that we have right now, is that we've got all of this technology that we're importing into this country, and it's being made there. You really don't know what is in it. And guaranteed, they're hoping that some government agency is going to go pick it up, or some contractor, and that's more likely going to happen. Some contractor is going to pick up this, this equipment made in China, and then they're going to turn on their little features so that they can find backdoors in, so that they can get access to things, so that they can shut down things. But more likely, so they can exfiltrate data and steal, the plans for the next, next greatest stealth fighter, or whatever we're doing, in terms of military development. And that's why right now, what I've seen in terms of cybersecurity in cyber threats is that China has put a huge focus on going after contractors.
Yep.
And they've moved away from, they're still trying to attack, federal government, but at the end of the day, the federal government's got a lot of money and they spend a lot of their time auditing themselves and making sure that they have, equipment that's only, purchased off of, federal procurement that's gone through some level of testing. All those stuff slips through all the time. But the contracting world, it's a lot harder to regulate. So they have this whole, CMMC certification that's supposed to be monitoring some of that stuff, but it's gotten pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And we're not even near being up to scale where we need to be. And I've seen this happen. And so the chip manufacturing piece of it is one piece, but it's a huge piece, because right now, so much of what we get is being shipped here, from outside this country, in terms of, the semiconductor technology, and not just that, but pretty much dang near everything. Very little do we manufacture here anymore in America.
Yes, sir. And I saw some of the questions. I'm looking over here, and you were mentioning like LTCCs. Okay, you were mentioning that, as far as
explain that to people, because most folks don't have no idea what that is.
Okay, so whenever you have, LTT or LTCCs, low temperature core fired ceramics. Okay, now I want you to think about a processor board, like a PCB board, and it's laminated. It's just like plywood's laminated. Well, your PCB board's laminated. It's got its base and it's got other things added to it. But in those layers, you have the whole vernacular of the circuitry that's running through it. And so as you have your circuit board, you got one layer, then you might have one, you've seen all of the vernacular of all of the circuits that's going on a PCB board. Okay, and those are all going to different components.
I'm going to explain this for folks that are listening right now. If you don't know what he's talking about, if you've ever opened up an inside of a computer, there's like this green board that's in there that has all these wires on it and all these little chips on it and everything, or any kind of electronics that you've ever opened up. That's what he's talking about. This board that's there.
In the old Radio Shack days, it was really simple. Right? It was like you had a PCB board, all your components on a Radio Shack radio kit that I used to love. But now it's more complicated. It's layers and layers. It's inside the PCB board. And then you have your processor setting on it. You have your logic chips and other things that's on there that we frankly don't, most people in the cyber world have no idea what we're looking at. Okay.
Right.
Now here's a problem. Now with that, okay, I hate to digress, Nate, but I have to at this moment. You see this little thing here? This computer, this is a computer. I can put a total operating system on this baby and plug it into a smart TV or just, anything that's got HDMI cable, and I can run that. Now, what's inside of here is not really a lot to talk about. But the problem is this is 1/16 the size of a PCB board for your laptop. Now, when you go buy a laptop, Nate, do we know what we're looking at if you had to take a screwdriver to it and pop that thing open and discern which is the actual computer that your OS is setting on, and which one's the one setting in there hidden that's talking behind your back on some other software-defined environment, like an SDR.
Yeah, okay, I mean, nowadays with solid state technology, you don't even have hard drives anymore, on these in these laptops. There's no disks that are in there. There's no magnetic disks. So, and you're right. Most people open that up and they have no idea what these different components are. They don't know what might be transmitting, what might be, listening, what might be, collecting keystrokes.
It's schizophrenic. I mean,
it is.
You're dealing with a schizophrenic piece of hardware. You don't know what's on that board. I don't know what's on it. I haven't cracked open this computer to see what's on it and actually look and discern, okay, this belongs to this one computer. How many multi-layer capacitors are there? Which, you can make a capacitor out of, the LTCCs, the ceramic coating. You can make a capacitor with that. But that's what that material is. It's used as an insulator, and it helps with
Right.
high frequency in insulators and that kind of thing. As you're building your PCB board up, you put in layers of the circuit down. It could be in gold or whatever, precious metal, to make the circuitry. And you fire that, and then you put another layer on top of it. And that LTCC is actually great for insulation of heat and extreme cold. Now, the downside to it is it's brittle. So when it comes to shock vibration and things like that, if you're using that in some aerospace application or something like an armored vehicle or a semi truck, that vibration could affect it. It could snap, crackle, pop on you, depends on how thick it is. And so as you're designing your board, you want to make, and some of this can be screen printed. You can screen print these laminates on here. And you can also put things in between them and sandwich it to where it's got some flexibility. Okay. So if you want to use that material, you can use it just as an insulator. You can use it as, a solid, base to put things through on and append it to the board. Or you can actually use it as part of an MLC, a multi-layer capacitor application. So I'm geeking out right now. I'm sorry, but
It's all right.
but the thing is I want to get back to talking about the reason I created the American Industrial Compact. And I've been attacked viciously by our wonderful friends over there in the Orient. They've hit my website. They hit me, and you have to understand this is part of the game we're playing. And they are malicious. And, I think my website has more warning labels on it than a dirty movie. Okay. So don't go there if you see my email on my website. But the compact was made to basically bring a sense of allegiance to the country. If you're a CEO, and you feel like you're going to sell out, you just have to sell your company. You can't keep it going. Sell it to an American. Somehow find a way to keep it here. And if you're
let me ask you something on that note, because this is something I've been in the process of reading a book recently that's getting into what you're just talking about right now. And there are major hedge funds that a lot of people in various industries utilize for capital. And of course, I'm talking about the three big ones: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. And the concern that I have with and it's not just those three companies, but you've got so much multinational corporations that are embedded in our finance that it becomes very difficult to keep foreign investment out of American businesses. Especially, you may think that you're keeping, you may have a hedge fund that's an American hedge fund, but maybe in that hedge fund is a whole bunch of other interests from other countries, including China. And I have concerns about that. And I'm curious about your thoughts about that have you seen any problem with that in terms of the development of semiconductor industry here in the United States? Because my understanding is that the capital investment for building a chip making factory is extremely expensive.
Okay, well, I want to touch on this because this is a real thing. Though the past years, I mean, you go back to the barn burners in the 2020, when you had, Antifa, BLM out here burning buildings down and acting like they did, and grateful generation doing what they did. From then till now, I would probably even venture to go back during the days of Obama, whenever he brought in the Muslim Brotherhood and all of that into America and infiltrated that throughout the government. And you go from Muslim Brotherhood to the days of Antifa, where their barn burners are out here destroying cities and getting people killed. And where we're sitting at right now, we've actually turned a corner and things are getting righted on this ship. But we have went through essentially the same kind of conditions of a civil war. But we haven't piled on the bodies like the Civil War, but we have went through similar mental, psychological, economic stressors that has brought a lot of just normal people to their knees. And so what do you do with that? And how do you look at what this is for President Trump? He needs to see this as a post-Civil War reconstruction initiative or a Marshall Plan, because we are rebuilding an industry. We're not sitting here making good deals. We're making great deals for the country. So when these companies come here, they need to be part of the compact that says, you came here, you're staying. Just like you have a status of forces agreement, you need to have a compact agreement, an industrial compact agreement with the United States, to where if you're the CEO of a company, then you show up, okay? And you're going to be here for a long time. It's a compact. And so with that said, if you're coming here from Taiwan and you want to be here, okay, let's sit down and make a compact. Let's make an agreement. And with that, we'll be standing for the next 30 years. And if you've ever been overseas and served in any foreign countries, you remember they always throw that status of forces agreement up. They go, that's a SOFA agreement. Well, we have an industrial compact agreement. And that's what we need to make with these companies. And with that, we'll go into the H-1B issue. Well, it's really an Operation Paperclip on steroids.
Yeah.
And we call it immigration when actually the immigration is that's a caveat to the business deal. You come here, you serve America, you serve our interest, and you get your citizenship. That's it. But you also are committed to training so many people. They might, like one person might train like an NCO in the Army. You train 1,000 people in the next 10 years. Okay, that's 100 people a year. I don't think that's so hard. Or whatever standard you want that to be, but make a standard for that. And make it so that if the company decides, hey, we're going to leave, we don't like this anymore, we want to leave. Well, you pack your bags, you can go back to your country, but the factory is going to get renamed something else here in America, and we're holding on to this capability. And so when they show up here, you lock the battle hatches down. There's no escape hatches. You stay. And you
Right. It
train.
needs to be Hotel California. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave.
Yes, sir. And so that's what you do. And but when we do this, we have to do this with kindness in our heart as Americans.
Sure.
And we have to surround and take care of these people as they take care of us. And all of this other craziness that you see that's going on out here with the left wingers, like I said, we're going to have to get these back on, okay, and go to work. And because if we don't get this right, our kids are going to pay for it for the next 30 years. And this is the last stop, Nate. That's the reason I'm coming out and talking about this, is because me and you, there's nobody left that's going to actually try to stand up the industrial base. Okay. And if you don't have it right here, then our military does not have it. Okay. We're not going to go back to the days of muskets and whatever. We've got to be a leader in technology. And that means we've got to own what we're doing. Lock, stock, and barrel. That means from mining. And it means chemicals. Whenever you're talking about the chemical world, we've got to deregulate. We've got to allow these companies to exist here. And then when you're talking about, assembly and parts, that means everything. CNC machines, people like Totten Gilroy out there in Texas. You're talking about the big behemoths. Bring them in with your OEMs. And I'm talking about Intel, Micron, NVIDIA, all of them. Bring them in to technology resorts and allow them to train our people. And
I've thought about, like, you take, for example, where I live here in West Virginia. We should be building technology parks that have their own clean coal-fired power plants or gas-fired power plants that can supply all the electricity that's needed at a bare minimum cost. It's not part of the grid, not connected to the grid, but just for these technology parks. This should be something that we should have been doing 10 years ago. And now, we've got to get on top of this, because the amount of power that's going to be needed for some of the data mining operations, some of the AI driven stuff that's being done, it's going to take a lot of considerable amounts of power.
Now, Nate, you said technology park. Now, I'm going to have to assert technology resort, and I'm going to say why.
Sure.
Okay. You have a technology park, and this is something that I've learned over the past 5 years. Technology parks are very transient. They'll come here, set up for a minute, and they're gone. They disappear.
Yeah.
And like when you start talking about the tool sets, when you start talking about dicing machines, vapor deposition chambers, all the etching, all the equipment you need to do something in that one category of the semiconductor world, um, crystal growing chambers, all of that stuff. You have to provide students the means and ways to come in and stay for a block of instruction. Make that your first stage. Like if you're going to AIT in the Army, well, your
Yeah.
first thing is your AR, VR training. Then second stage would be the technology resort in that region where you've got hotel rooms where you would stay at, and you work on kinetic engagement with the machines. And then you go out to your job site, and that's where you go get your OJT and you finish up. A lot of these machines don't require PhDs, believe it or not. Okay.
Yeah.
They don't. It requires a finger and two legs and an arm attached to the finger that makes it work. Okay. And a brain just to know what the graphic user interface says and know what to do with that machine's functions. So a lot of this stuff is really kind of, we have really made these things into like giant behemoth, like you're launching a SpaceX rocket or something, when it's not really that complicated. You don't need an IQ of 154 to operate it. You just have to know what your function calls are on that machine, that tool set. And that's companies like Disco, ASML, they have all these tool sets that makes an assembly line inside of a fab. And they train and instruct these people to do it, and they don't spend years doing it. Like the Intel facility out in Arizona, they train their technicians to work on those tool sets, and that's what they do. And they might migrate over and cross level and train on other tools. But for the most part, that's what they're going to do as they ascend through one day, maybe managing a facility. Now, we have to actually get our heads wrapped around how are we going to entice these companies to show up here and have them stay. Okay, so that's going to be a challenge for President Trump, is actually figuring out how are we going to do this and make it regional. And if we're going to do this, we have to look at the regions of America to where everybody, and I mean everybody, has ample opportunity to get a skills passport. Okay. In the military, you get your GT score, your ASVAB. Okay. Well, America needs that same kind of process to give everybody a skills passport. And you take a test, online test, and it says, hey, you're strong in or here in this. You can do these kind of things in the semiconductor industry. And that skills test would actually have you take an AR, VR kind of training. Okay, so that's the first stage.
But we need to get to these kids while they're still in high school, even
Yes.
junior high. I mean, we can't be waiting for them to go to college and figure out what they want to do in life. In fact, that's part of the problem, is we need a pipeline. The education system that we have right now is all screwed up, partly because the government has been so involved in it. It's not free market in any way, shape, or form. You can go out and get a degree in anything, and the government will give you a grant for it, provided the school has a proper accreditation. But how many more lawyers do we need? I mean, the reality is, like, on that issue, my daughter wanted to be a lawyer. So, she was in high school, and I was asking her, have you thought about what you want to do? She says, oh, I think I want to be a lawyer. And I said, okay, let's go look and see what the national, what was it? Oh gosh, it's the government agency that Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I said, let's go look at Bureau of Labor and Statistics and see, what the amount of money that you're going to spend to get your degree, how long, what the employability is. And I was actually shocked. I was expecting to see something completely different than when I saw. What I found out was that lawyers had like the highest number of people in white collar professions that was unemployed. And so I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. It's okay. This might be a problem. But the point is they have this information. They know what's upcoming. They know what's needed. They know where we're going to have gaps. And they should be gearing like scholarship and grant programs for education for those areas where we have needs to fill, not just guaranteeing a scholarship to any Tom, Dick, and Harry that wants to get a degree in basket weaving, So this is one of the areas I think is a problem.
When you hear the word exceptionalism, okay,
Yeah.
Exceptionalism, and people make a big deal out of that. Take exceptionalism down to its root word, exception. Okay. And you take a problem set, and that problem set's got so many variables in it. In engineering firms, they sit there and they work a problem set, and it's got these variables inside the parentheses, problem 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. The parentheses close, and you got the equal sign over there. So they work all these problems, they high jump over the equal sign, they have their solution. It might be an 80th percentile solution for that 100th percentile of problem sets. They didn't totally close the door on it and get it to 100%, but they got it to good enough. And then when it gets over the equal sign, what happens to it is it gets put into the real environment, they bust it up, tear it up, and then you have the real people that come in and fix it. Now, that person who you said platform, product, whatever it is, and they took it to its max extent. They took it and tested it to failure. And they take it and they smash it, bash it. They put a Black & Decker aquarium pump on it plus a whatever, an espresso machine. And they make this thing work. Well, guess what? That was the exception to this rule of problems. That was the exception. Okay. Now there's exceptional people all over the place. And we have done a really good job at, getting people into these little boxes, these intellectual boxes, and we call them all the eugenics names like stupid, moron, idiot, imbecile, all of that. Okay. And that's really kind of like mocking people that you don't understand. And I've had people that are simple old country truck drivers come up with amazing armor solutions. And I've sat inside of test directors' offices before with PhDs in physics and all of that. And they're looking at this composite armor sitting there. It's maybe the aero density is probably like 5 pounds or something per square foot, super lightweight. And you're going, how in the world did you do this? And I've had this guy sit there and go, well, I'm just a simple old country boy truck driver. And I did this in my backyard. Well, he was an exception. God bless his heart. He was the exception to all of these scientists and engineers who sat there and said, this will never work. And guess what?
Right.
It did. And so we're not listening to the exceptional people. We're listening to the people we put up on these ivory towers, and we're going, those are our heroes.
Academics. Yeah.
Yes. And they're theoretical people that's never went out on the street and done anything. And so I'm looking for the street fighters. I want the people who's earned their scars. I want to surround myself by people who's really went out here and erected things out of the ground, who have really built products, put themselves at risk, and came out on the top end with a success story. That's who I want to team with. I don't want to be around the people who are screaming from the bleachers and acting like a bunch of berserko crazy nut jobs. If you're not here to add to the solution, then pack sand. Get out of my freaking airspace. I have no time for you.
Yep.
So, and that's what you see on the left all the time. It's a constant, just belligerent craziness. And we're running out of time. That's our most valuable commodity is our time. It's the most precious thing you'll ever have. And whenever this life is over for me, I don't want to be looking at, having God look upon my life and go, Brian, how much time did you spend worrying about these purple-haired crazy nut jobs? We've got real problems to solve for this country right now. The only reason I'm coming out into the light now is to make what I've done and what we've been part of for the past better part of 16 years to elevate this to where we start putting real exceptional people up there. Now, it might not be me, okay? It might be somebody else. I'm willing to accept that. But what I'm not willing to accept is to sit here and remain silent because I'm afraid of screaming crazy people, okay? I'm not afraid of that. I was married one time before, so I know what that's like, okay? And but anyway, the thing is we got to have some fun as we're doing it too, and we have to enjoy what we're going to do, and we have to do it with love in our heart for our country. And we're grateful. I'm grateful to have President Trump. I really am. I'm grateful for his people. I'm grateful to have people like you in my orbit, and it's only getting better. But I don't want to take my foot off the gas, and I'm going to push it. I'm going to push myself until the bitter end. And I hope that there's going to be more people coming on board, to join up on this, because this is going to be like a Marshall Plan, Nate. This is what is required, is the Marshall Plan for semiconductors and microelectronics. Without that, I promise you, we are going to end up giving our children those MAP gas burners. We're going to end up out and go look it up on Google. Get one of these right here and set it by your doorstep every day, and sit there and go, "Is this what your future is? Is that your
Yeah.
future? You know, do you want to do like they're doing in? If you look up e-wasteland in Ghana, look it up.
Yep.
Children e-wasteland Ghana." And you'll see those kids out there with those burners, and they're taking chips off of old electronic PCB boards.
You
And
know,
so,
on that note, another thing that kind of this whole thing reminds me of is, for the longest time as a country, we depended on foreign oil, to run our country, to be able to be, a productive nation. And we had to, because of that, it caused us to be involved in endless foreign wars, because that became such an important strategic asset for us. And now it's not as big of a strategic asset. We've got plenty of enough oil and the means of being able to extract it. And so energy dominance is a huge thing that I think brings peace to the United States, because it gives us a very powerful, number one, it makes us not dependent on foreign countries for energy production, but it also gives us a very powerful economic tool that we're watching Trump use it right now.
right.
He's using our economic engine to stop wars, with Russia and the Ukraine, and he's using it to be able to get, to get things that we need that are of our that are of strategic importance to the United States. So the same holds true with anything that we have to depend on. So semiconductors is a massive one. Another one would be medicine. We found out during COVID that most of our medicine is being made overseas.
Yes.
And so how the heck, how did we get to that point? Again, if we're not manufacturing here, if we're not manufacturing steel here, and we've got to worry about importing it somewhere, it can be used against us. If we've got to worry about mining, that's another area. So to me, the way I look at it is like when you get these environmentalists that are not actual environmentalists, because I am for making sure that we do things safe so that we don't pollute our water and our air and our food.
Right.
But this nonsense climate change crap, and it is crap, because if they truly believed it, then they would be just as upset about China producing twice as much carbon as the United States does, as the United States producing carbon. And you wouldn't see them doing things like, they're worried about, they claim that the oceans are going to rise and all this. And yet Obama goes and buys a home, on the beach at Martha's Vineyard. And so you wouldn't see those things. You wouldn't see, guys like, Leonardo going to, flying in his private jet to go lecture people, about carbon footprints. That's the kind of nonsense that I see happening, and propaganda that's being pushed. So they say that out of one side of their face, and yet they basically live in a way that's completely contrary to that. But the reality is that we can mine everything that we need here in terms of rare earth minerals, and the problems, we haven't even explored a lot of our areas of where we could look for. This is one of the areas, one of the things I think why Trump has been so interested in Greenland is needing rare earth minerals. Now, on that note, I want to ask you, what is it right now that you're aware of is a problem for us in manufacturing chips? Because obviously you've got all of the necessary materials that are needed for that, in addition to having the infrastructure in place to build, semiconductors here. What rare earth minerals are we short on? And where should, the current administration be looking to build partnerships or explore our own territories?
Well, I think gallium nitride is like one of the top ones. Okay, so you look at GaN on SI. So you look at that, that's got high, like super resistance against heat and voltage. So GaN is right there with, when you start talking about your LTCCs, those two things marry up perfectly together. So I would say, pile in on those two things. Your precious metals, everything that's used for your circuitry layouts on your boards, that's important. Silver, that's important. Access to the chemical industry, that's really important as far as, as far as creating boards and your wafers. For doing a GaN facility, you could run up as much as 5 million gallons of water a month. Your energy requirements, bus stations and all of that's going up to a site. You have to do the math on that, plus the topographical studies on what's under the ground. Is a slate rock? What is it you're setting this on? And of course, a lot of those tools require like footers, foundation, like pillars.
Have you considered like, and I'm just bringing this up because this what you're talking about. I'm thinking about the fact that we've got this whole industrial base in the Ohio River Valley, and you got a massive river there that supplies a lot of water, and it used to be a massive steel producing area that is now pretty much depressed because all of the steel factories shut down. But you've got like rail, you've got all the things that that are necessary. You got water, rail, power, like you in abundance there. Everything that you would need. Are those places being considered right now for the types of production facilities that would be needed?
Yes, sir. I believe that just about every state's got people crawling all over the place looking for like those critical key intersections with water and power. Okay. So, and I'm sure a lot of the power conglomerates like TVA and Dominion and all of them, they're probably out there trying to do estimates on where would be a keen site for a fab. So I can't say which one's doing what, but I do believe that it would be crazy if you weren't doing that. You're in charge of Dominion Power, and you're not looking for a place where you can build a fab, because that's just more customers for you, right? And so, so when you look at the big power conglomerates, and that's the reason you see Texas doing really well, because they've got a lot of their own internal power themselves. If they can stay away from the windmill farms and the solar people.
Well, that's what we got to get rid of here in West Virginia. We've got everything. Like West Virginia's got a ton of natural gas, coal, oil, all right here. I mean, literally, we're producing it out of the ground here, and but they're still trying to be. And largely, this was pushed because of the whole green energy, deal from or the green energy scam is really what I would call it. They were spending hundreds of billions of dollars, basically pushing all of this green energy crap around windmills and solar farms. And meanwhile, we have all the necessary natural resources that we need, for producing power plants that we don't have to worry about replacing the windmills every 20 years. We don't have to worry about importing all this rare earth minerals in order to build these, these solar panels, that aren't going to produce anywhere near, the electricity that's needed. So this is to me about prioritizing what we have to look at. And I see Trump already doing this, is reprioritizing, where federal funding is going into some of our infrastructure. It needs to be going into those areas that are actually practical. I can't remember which company it was, but we just saw another green energy company that just failed, and it's like 10 times worse than Solyndra. I just saw this on the news the other day.
Well, I mean, there's people, and I'll say this, I think batteries have their place. And it's just like AI. I think AI's got its place, but whenever you're taking it and you're replacing your brain bucket with AI, I think you've got an issue. It's
without a doubt.
Your discernment.
Inherently, AI can do some heavy lifting in terms of big data digging, but at the end of the day, it will never replace the human brain, because it didn't. This is the big problem, in fact, that I see with AI. It's something I remember when I was in school, I was writing a paper on this. They were talking about AI 30 years ago. And I remember thinking that the problem with AI is that it doesn't grow up. It's not like a child that starts off defenseless, dependent, learning empathy, learning dependency on its parent, right? Learning from others. It basically, it doesn't have that 30 years of life that it's developing. And so it just kind of gets put onto the market and expected to have intuition, and I
Right,
think
right.
that's something that you can't, like, I see that right now. I'll see a guy come out of college and, he maybe went to the best school. He's got the highest grades, the best degree, and him and I can face the same problem and we'll look at it, and he knows all the same terminology, knows all the same, has all the same knowledge that I have. But what he doesn't have is he doesn't have the wisdom that goes along with it, or that intuition that comes from solving problems or making mistakes also, hundreds or thousands of times. And I'll go home, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and while I was sleeping, my mind was figuring it out, and I'll go in and solve the problem. And you don't see that that's something that you gain over time. It's not something you can't program it into AI,
Right.
So.
And I mean, it's okay to use it to augment your work. Okay,
Sure.
it's like whenever the Texas Instruments came out with their calculators, you ever looked at the patent on that? And that's like, they had to prove so much can work in as far as like what they put on those little memory chips, in the firmware.
Yeah.
And that was quite a hat trick, for its time. But big hats off to that. But when you look at what we have to do now, there's a liability to using AI. There's a big liability, big risk. You can't tell me you're going to go out here and develop a jet engine for General Electric just using total AI.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Because in the end of the story, when that plane has a spun bearing assembly that goes upside down on you, and that plane engine falls off the pylon of the wing, well, you're going to have to walk that dog back to a liability sequence and see who signed off on that. And are you going to say that your brain was inferior to the AI? Think about that for liability purposes. Who is going to sit there and take liability for an AI solution?
That's a very good point. Yeah. Well, this is the problem. Yeah, you have to have somebody that is going to be held accountable.
Exactly.
You certainly can't hold AI accountable. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So for liability purposes, and I saw this earlier, and you would have people making FEA software that would say, hey, you want to make this armor? Just add this much of this much of that, and this much of this will defeat, a spitball. This will defeat a BB. This will defeat a cannon fire, and you go out there and you lay that stuff up and you put it up on a shot test and you hit it and the thing just splatters all over the place. And you're going, this was a nightmare. And then okay, so just imagine, AI is really, in essence, it's a bunch of algorithmic, patterns are put together to give you a high probability of getting what you want to hear. Okay, so if I said, I want to hear a Johnny Cash song in rap, okay, well, it would give you that miserable outcome, but, it's not going to be a top 10 seller, okay, but it's going to be, but it's going to give you what you want. It's going to compromise the essence of what's right for what you want. So AI will lean toward things like that because that's what you want to hear, right?
Yeah.
So in my world, I was doing armor, if I was doing weapon systems or whatever I was developing, I had to sit there and I had to do angular analysis. I had to know recoil. I had to know, all kinds of friction, torsion, tension, all kinds of things that went into developing something. And when you have to do that, you have to test it. And when you test that, you're going to come back and go, okay, General, it's good to go. We've done this for a 3,000-mile round test. We've put this over the Belgian block. We've beat the crap out of this thing, and it always survives. Okay. Now, what we do with the semiconductor industry, guess what? We have to set up a cadre, just like we did in the days of the Marshall Plan.
Mm-hmm.
And you said earlier, you were talking about, the evil empires that are out there, the dun 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 dun, the Darth Vaders in the banking industry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, guess what we did during the days of the Marshall Plan? We created a whole bank just to handle the billions of dollars that was going around the world. And they had people on the ground that was actually keeping their eyeballs on everything moving. Okay, like their own inspector generals. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
You want where that IG thing came from? Go back in time. Okay, so President Trump is actually creating, some of these instruments right now. We don't see it. We don't understand it. Like why we have a sovereign wealth fund, and the left wingers are losing their mind. Okay, well, you've got to have a means to repair the country. Remember, this is a Marshall Plan, an Eisenhower Plan that we're doing. Okay, in order to do that, you have to have the means and ways to look in and discern whether or not money is being allocated properly. and
Right.
and as you're doing that medical procedure, you have to start building things in place to uphold that structure. And I don't get it. I've been laid off from government contracts a gazillion times. There was nobody protesting for me when I was leaving the shipyards or when I was leaving Quantico
Yep.
or anywhere else. There was nobody lined up and down the street saying, poor little Brian lost his job. He lost his lease. He lost his deposits on those expensive $3,000 a second apartments in Alexandria, all those overrated places. I never got anybody crying for me, and so I find it hard to get my violin out for what I'm seeing. But no, I'm just telling you.
I know what you mean, man. I'm dealing with something like that myself right now.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, Nate, is like when I was doing armor work, I had companies and people coming to me and offer me my buyout. They were like trying to bribe me, I guess, to go work for somebody else from home to quit doing what I was doing. They were like, hey, could I pay you $2 million or whatever to go take an office desk at your home and just retire from what you're doing? Just go and we got this. We can take care of that. Those people will probably take care of it over there. You know what? I didn't take it. I never took any of that. I got the crap kicked out of me in life, but I didn't sell my soul, and I never will. And so, if President Trump ever sees what we're doing here, we're the real McCoy. People like you, your friends and your associates, we're the real McCoy, man. Because we're not. This is the end for us, and so there's nothing left. You're not going to impress me with your money. I want to see your results. That's all I want to see. Everything else is for your own image, your own edification. I'm not building a church to all these people. And if you're not part of the solution, you are the problem. And the Democrats have lost everything. They are a diseased temple of nothing good.
I mean, pretty much, most of the people who were ideologically, maybe classical liberals, and that was the only reason they were Democrats, they've left the party. And what you got there now is basically a bunch of communists. I mean, there's really no other term for it. They are Marxists at their core, and I think, honestly, I think that they are. I don't think that it's. I don't think they're like. I don't think they have a diabolical, wish for the destruction of America. I think they are brainwashed by some of our enemies who have been, basically pushing this nonsense in our country to try to destroy us from the inside. And that's why it's like, it's crazy. You look at let's just take Tesla, right? 5 years ago, everybody was worshiping the ground that Elon Musk, walked on, because he was, part of the green revolution with the, these, electric cars and all that, which, I've got my own thoughts about electric cars and what they do to the power grid and all the things that are needed for them. But I'm cool with, with innovation, and I don't have a problem with that. But then now, because he sides with Trump and because he's supporting, America First agenda, now you've got all these same crazy people now going and destroying, private citizens' vehicles, that they've paid for. You've got them, spray painting swastikas on them. It's lunacy. And that's what we're seeing in this country, in the Democrat Party. And I think the Democrat Party is going to be dead here. So the question is going to be what's going to come in to replace it. Because I do think that there's always going to end up being some balance of power at some point. I think that probably there'll be some sort of split within the Republican Party at some point, because the Democrat Party is going to cease to exist. I don't see it surviving.
No, I mean, everybody you see screaming right now is screaming because they have something that's viced down on their nervous system. Okay, they're
Yeah.
compromised at some point in their bank accounts or their family's bank accounts.
Yeah.
They've been bought off and leveraged.
Without a
And
doubt.
and so when I hear it, I hear all of these people losing it. I'm sitting there going, you'd be chill just like me if you didn't take the buyout from our enemies. You'd be
That's
okay.
right.
You won't be squealing about nonsense.
Well,
You'd be,
that's what I worry about. I want to bring something up because it kind of fits into what you're just talking about. Buyouts by our enemies, and I think this is a big problem even within American companies. Right now, it used to be 15 CFR Part 7. They think they updated it in 2024, so it's now 15 CFR Part 791. And what this has to do with is basically there's a general prohibition. This is a law signed into law by Congress that forbids the supply chain from several foreign countries. And those countries that are listed, I think, it's the People's Republic of China is number one. You cannot have any supply chain from those, from the PRC on anything that is used, and that's components or software development. If it's going to be used on anything that is part of America's national critical infrastructure, can't use Chinese parts, can't use Chinese software. The Republic of Cuba, Islamic Republic of Iran, the North Korea, Russia, Venezuela. Those are so there's 6 countries now, because I think there was 5 at originally. So they've updated that. But then you go down and you look at, like you mentioned, gallium, right? Gallium nitrate. And when you look at that as a resource that's needed, and I did a little bit of, while we were talking, if I was looking away, that's because I'm pulling up some stuff just to kind of dig into some things. So gallium nitrate's critical for 5G infrastructure, for military radar, satellite communications, and its supply chain falls under 15 CFR Part 791, meaning we're not supposed to be getting it from China. So, but when you look at the world's supply of it right now, China is the supplier for over 80% of the world's gallium as of 2025.
and
So,
do you know why they're the world suppliers? Because they care to dig.
yep,
In America, we've got like 3 places where gallium nitride. And the EPA, in all of the past 20 years of, playing your environmental violin for, the Al Gore's wallets, we have stopped exploration for GaN.
right.
Now, gallium nitride is used as a substrate for wafers, and it gives it high resilience against heat and voltage and that kind of thing. So, we need to get some picks and shovels back out and get back to work and figure out where we can find more GaN. And, that's, you look at the Bureau of Land Management, those guys, they make their bread and butter off of seizing land and doing things to cattle and all kinds of other stuff. It's
Right.
unpleasant. And they get enormous kickbacks. Doge should go over there and dive into their footlocker and see what they've done.
That's a very good idea. In fact, maybe the Bureau of Land Management needs to be about actually managing land and making sure that we're doing the necessary exploration so that we can find these rare earth minerals here in the United States. That's a very good point. That
Yes.
sounds to me like kind of like Trump's idea about, replacing the IRS with an external revenue service. I kind of like that idea. I think they should do the same thing with the Bureau of Land Management. They should basically replace or redesign the mission of it to go after finding these rare earth minerals and resources that are here in the United States, because we're going to have to start doing this. Tell us what happens if we don't.
Just to be fair about that, Nate, when you start talking about BLM, Bureau of Land Management, you talk about all these mystery fires like in Maui and all of it, even North Carolina and East Tennessee. Okay. You see the way that FEMA conducted themselves with those people in North Carolina. They wanted people to die over there. Okay.
Yeah,
these FEMA nuts, they wanted people to die. You know what? If you work for FEMA and you're watching this, you don't like it. You know what I look like. You can come and see me anytime you please. But I think that there's so many, awful people that are out there right now that are purposely throwing minefields down to sector out. When you talk about Bureau of Land Management, these areas where the fires hit, there's a lot of things there. There's a lot of things there. Once you get rid of the people, there's a lot of resources there. Or if there's not resources, there's plans for things to be put there. It's all of a
Yeah.
sudden, Mike, right? I do planning on facilities. I engineer and
Yeah.
design these things. Nobody says, hey, Brian, hey, come here. There's going to be a fire over there. It's going to take out 2,000 acres of land. Can you design something to go on that? Because I've got a senator and congressman that want to give me $13 billion to build said whatever over there. This doesn't mysteriously happen. Okay, the amount of work it goes into planning a site for development, it's enormous. This is years in the making. And I sent you the link to that technology resort. I don't know where you would put said technology resort. You would have to really codify that agreement with every state, every governor, every city, municipal level event. But these things, all of a sudden, the magic plans show up, like from the dark world of banking, those rock people, the Bernie Rubble rock people that's real, Okay, well, those people have all of a sudden made plans and the fire shows up and, I just don't know how it happens. There's just people with matches and gasoline everywhere. And there's even other conspiracy theories about the thing in Maui,
Yeah.
and whenever people don't show up, there's no water and all of this. Gavin Newsom is a putz. There's no way in the world you can tell me you're a governor of a state and you've got that mayor down there and you
They
don't have,
emptied out all of the supply of water.
yeah, you don't have water. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you cut the supply of hair product off to Gavin Newsom, and that guy will squeal like a little girl. Okay, but you cut the water supply off and let the state burn in half. Gavin Newsom sitting over there acting like he's doing everything he can.
Yeah.
And people died over there. Boatloads of people died over there, and Gavin Newsom can still stand around with a somewhat straight back. He should be ashamed of himself.
Well, but this is the same. These are the same elites who, and they're on the Democrat side. You even got them in the Republican Party too. But they're the same ones who will tell everybody, "Oh, go home, lock yourself inside your home, shut your business down, wear a mask, wear 2 masks, wear 3 masks, go get injections with a bunch of shots that nobody's tested thoroughly, and but I'm not doing any of that for me or mine." And so, Gavin Newsom saying this, and then he's out there, Nancy Pelosi, right? Oh, shut down everything, but open up the hair salon so I can go get my hair done. Gosh, what was his name? Who's the former governor of New Jersey? Real rhino.
The governor of where?
What's that?
Oh, Chris Christie.
Yeah, Chris Christie. Remember when Chris Christie, he shut down the beach, and him and his wife and his kids were on the beach, and they were basically everybody else had to go home, but he's on the beach, and enjoying it. And that's the crazy thing, is that these people, they have this elitist attitude, and what's good for you is not the same thing that's good for me. Do as I say, not as I do. And that is the problem with a lot of these folks, is they have no moral compass. And I do think that's a problem. I'm excited about our future, but I see some problems ahead that we're going to have to tackle. And one of the things I think is the supply chain problem. We've got to rapidly speed up our ability to survey and find these minerals, and then the capital investment that's going to be necessary in order to build, these operations. I looked at, I'll give another example, fertilizer. And fertilizer is a hugely important industry for agriculture. And we've seen massive amounts of fertilizer costs and farmers, costs going up because of the war in the Ukraine. The main reason why is because like the majority of the fertilizer in the world being produced by Russia. And yet one of the primary ingredients in fertilizer is nitrogen, which we have a ton of, and so they use natural gas as one of the primary uses for, or one of the primary uses for natural gas is producing. So why aren't we producing it here? Because the infrastructure costs a lot of money to get up, and because our EPA blocks, the development of these things. Why do we have to, pump all of our natural gas out and then send it down, to Texas? I've asked this question of our own state legislator. Why aren't we building refineries here in West Virginia so that we don't have to pipe it down there, but we can produce it right here? We can basically refine it here. And
yeah, there's no reason why we can't do it here, Nate. Okay.
Yeah.
The whole thing has been regulated or backdoored out of country. Okay. Like all of a sudden Ukraine is like a leader in making fertilizer. Who knew that? I don't know. I mean, but the same place that we're basically paying child support for Hunter Biden's oil deal.
Exactly. And I'm basically every day I hear, we've got all these coal mines and, basically in West Virginia, and they've shut down the coal power plants. But for some reason, I keep seeing trains and trains of truckloads and truckloads. I counted it one day. It was 327 cars filled with coal going through my backyard, CSX rail. And I'm asking myself, where's all this coal going? Because I know it's not going to, power plants here in West Virginia anymore, at least not, not most of it. And I started researching it. It's going to China. It's going to Brazil, India. We're exporting our natural resources rather than using them here.
Yeah.
So
it's really kind of crazy how we sit here and go, stop coal. Coal is so bad.
Right.
And we sell it to everybody else, and we cripple our own energy capabilities.
Exactly.
Back in the late or early 2000s, there were still coal burning plants around. And guess what? They were very clean. Okay. And like the one that's near me was providing gobs of energy to Texas. And so
and the best part is like they can even, it's not like you don't have to worry about like the gas evaporating off or something like that. You don't have to basically they sit it on the ground right next to it. It can rain, you can have weather, it doesn't matter. It doesn't break down. So it's like there's like mountains of coal, at some of these plants, the few that still exist here in West Virginia. But it's just crazy. And so it doesn't make sense why we're not doing, those things here. So I hope that we will expand our mining operations. We have to, because we're going to need to get China cannot have 80% of the market. When they have 80% of the market, it's not just about the United States. We may think, okay, we can go and find that 20% that they're not providing, and we'll use that for ourselves. But the problem is that every other country is beholden to China as well. And this is the problem with natural gas. During the Ukraine-Russia war, you have Germany, who is basically funding the war in the Ukraine and then buying natural gas, from Russia because they depend on it. Instead of the U.S., instead of Biden saying, you know what, we will sell you natural gas because we've got so much of it in abundance here, and we will just produce more and we'll sell it to you, and starve the Russian army so that they can't continue their war in the Ukraine. That would have made more sense and would have cost a whole hell of a lot less lives. But instead, you got these same people in Europe that are basically, they're funding both sides of the war. So,
when you look at the global economy, the United States should be able to stand on its own 2 feet.
Yep.
Without any reliance on anybody else. Okay. And what I think that President Trump needs to do with commerce, with NIST, also with probably Peter Navarro as well, they need to develop a product DNA matrix And we need to take a real assessment of everything that comes into the United States, what we produce and goes out.
Yeah.
And let's just say if it was this cup, if you're going to buy this cup, your product DNA should have the paint listed on here. It should have what makes the cup, the ceramic. It should have the mold. It should have all of these things, okay? And that DNA goes on a barcode. And then a lot of people are going to be skeptical and say, we already do that. No, we don't. We don't do it with this cell phone. We don't do it with that. And when that cell phone, you have that product DNA listed to that phone, you want to know what this rubber casing is made of, where the
Yeah.
origins of that composite comes from. And you know what? I don't care. Let's be honest. Let's know where it comes from. I'm not saying stop buying the phone, but know where the phone's everything comes from. It's integrated
Yeah.
circuits, it's polymers, the polyamides, everything that goes into this thing. Let's just say, just for accounting reasons, let's know where it comes from. So if you're the Secretary of Commerce and you know that there's something on here that's critically short, like gallium nitride, well, if you're a Commerce Secretary, wouldn't you think it'd be wise to help promote gallium nitride mining by looking at a product DNA list? So you got like a big dashboard. It says, hey, show me what's short in America. Well, we're short on TiO2, and we're short on gallium nitride, and we're short on silver, magnesium, we're short on copper. That's like all your precious metals. And we're also short on circuits and all kinds of other things, right?
Yeah.
And so if we don't have a list of what we're short of, then we're always going to be codependent upon the next thing from somebody else. So if we're going to be sitting here taking accountability of the money, take accountability of the acquisition as well. The whole acquisition system in the government. Take accountability for that. Where's it coming from? What's it made of? If it's a tank, how many things are in that tank is coming from somewhere afar? Because if we get into a fist fight, God forbid, and we have to go to war, and we have to make the composite rubber that's hermetically sealed around a tank tire, what if we're short on that chemical? I don't know, just hypothetically speaking. What if it's a synergetic material for explosives? What if we're short on that? We can't even make fertilizer. So what makes you think we're going to make explosives?
Yep.
That's like one of the base components of making HE or whatever is the same thing that's in fertilizers, right? Same kind of chemical. So we have to.
Germanium, that's another one. China produces 60 to 70% of the world's germanium.
Right. So we're having to ask everybody for permission to go to war if we have to. And I'm not for war. If we can save our service members' blood and bone and their precious lives, that's where I reside all the time. And so right now it looks like there's a lot of Bitcoin that's probably going to be flying out of Ukraine into data farms all across the country and all around the world from the embezzlement that's happened with $350 billion.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Doge is the gift that keeps on giving. Every morning I wake up, I go online to see what Doge is exposing now. And I think that we're going through the slow, painful wake up process. I mean, there's many of us that are already awake to what's been happening, but
yes, sir.
But there are many people who, I'm hearing it every day. I've got friends that have been liberals their whole lives that are reaching out to me, and they're like, you know what, I'm leaving the Democrat Party, and and I'm anti-woke now, and it's like, because I think what people are seeing is they're seeing the destructive nature of this woke mind virus that we've been living under. And they're realizing that all of these people who claim to be, they're benevolent benefactors had no benevolent, mission in mind. I saw this really interesting chapter in this book I'm reading, and it was talking about how the big banking cartels will go out and they'll buy up stock, in companies. And rather than continuing to buy the stock at, as the price keeps going up and up, they will buy enough stock in every company in that industry, and then cause some sort of crisis, some sort of, cataclysmic event that basically, causes a recession in that industry, so that when everybody starts selling off their stock at a lower price, they can go and then buy it up and increase their share ownership that way. And to me, they need to take a look at like our current antitrust laws don't seem to be designed for those types of tactics. Like they're designed for, one company owning, a monopoly. But what happens when you have a cartel that owns a monopoly? And that's really what I see going on is it's basically, it's like these banking cartels. And they've figured out how to make money. They don't make money off of evaluating a stock and seeing whether that company produces a product that is a good product and that, has good business practices and a good idea. That's not how they invest. No, they invest, completely in a different way that they don't care if the company succeeds or fails, because if it fails, that's good for their bottom line, because then they can go buy more of that stock.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. So we got to work on, I think, there's some economic issues in the finance area that are going to need to be fixed. We obviously have problems in the environmental protection area where we've got to be able to open up, our ability to get the raw materials that are needed. And then we've got to be able to have the capital investment and the entrepreneurs that are willing to invest, in these chip manufacturing plants and things like that. So and power plants and new, I think of like in the cyber world, of course, you think about like infrastructure for high-speed internet. You can go to Romania and get way better internet than you can get here. And the reason is because it was built more recently. We haven't really upgraded a lot of our infrastructure, although you got guys like Elon Musk that have, done some amazing things with, low orbit satellites and Starlink, which I think has really opened the door for, for internet for a lot of people. So kind of what you talked about earlier, when we first started our conversation, you were mentioning about how you kind of came up with a lot of these ideas because there was a need. What is that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention. So we just need to unmove or loosen those shackles from people that are basically that have great ideas, that have the drive and the ability to innovate and solve some of these problems that we have. And and the best way to do that is remove the regulation that is stopping them from being able to make those investments. But also, we got to open up the doors of being able to create the capability for them to find capital without having to sacrifice their company or sacrifice their soul, to whoever they got to go get capital from. So,
Right. We do. We have to. There's the thing that we actually have to treat the semiconductor industry like it is a national treasure event.
Yeah.
And because it's the center beating heart of industry. And so
Yeah.
you want it should be part of your infrastructure plan. Like if you're planning, oh, we got to secure the grid. Remember all those days of sitting and listening to that, like there was somehow a loitering nuclear weapon that was hovering over the power plant or something. Yeah, it is a vulnerable, and our grid is in need of a lot of help, a lot of work. But also we've got to think about our supply chain and our technology capabilities, such as the semiconductors. And we need to start taking software people and make them hardware people.
Yeah, I agree.
In China, I'm sure they've got like a few million guys hanging out over there that are they're hybrids, they're hardware and software people. And that's how they're able to hide a computer on your computer. And we cyber people don't even know it's right there, hidden under your plastic.
There was a time when, like, the Army, I think, does a pretty good job of this. Is like when I went through my A school, I went in as a telecommunications computer operator maintainer. They taught us, they did a really good job of teaching us the fundamentals before we ever even touched the machinery.
Yeah.
They taught us, they had us basically soldering. It was funny because I remember in high school thinking, what the hell am I ever going to use algebra for? This is waste of my time. And then I get in the Army and I have an electronics class, and algebra is all about, figuring out, what amount of resistance is needed for the current and
Yep.
all of this other stuff. And so I finally was like, now I understand. And so, but they had us, basically build, a breadboard with circuits on it. And then, we had to test them, and then they also had us do some basic programming. And I can't even remember. I think it was like, what was
Like
it? Basic.
Fortran or Pascal or
I
something.
think
And
it was
then,
like basic, actually. It was basic
yeah.
program.
Oh,
And
basic. Yeah. Yeah. I had basic or C
yep.
plus and basic and
But
then
yeah,
Visual
and so they
Basic.
but they had us do that, it wasn't like a in-depth course, but they wanted you to understand the fundamentals, because when you're in your, when you're in your box out in the desert somewhere or in the jungle somewhere, and something breaks down and you don't have another circuit board to throw in there, guess what? You're going to have to innovate and fix it.
Yes.
You're going to have to solder a circuit on there, and you might have to scrap pieces from other ones that are broken and solve that problem. And if you don't have that basic set of fundamental understanding, then you won't be able to figure it out. So we need to take that same model, I think, and for
I was
education,
I was
that needs
actually
to
in the
be put
middle of
in
a
there.
situation like that where we're in the middle of a station, and this thing was filled up with, there's a radio rack, rack rig, it was like packed, it
Yeah,
was just like it set in there's making the hair on your body stand up, so much static electricity. And
that's
you
like
have to
my
go
house
outside,
right now.
you have to take your boots off and run outside and ground yourself in the mud, and get all that static off of you. But a lightning bolt hit that darn thing, and it baked. I mean, it just basically baked this one box. And we were out there for 3 weeks. And all we had was like very minimal means to put that breadboard, take another one, cannibalize it out of another box that wasn't used.
Yeah,
And it was a different system altogether, but we found the same board and we're going, okay, we got to figure this out.
yeah,
And we spent the better part of 7, 8 days trying to put that darn thing back together and get that one unit in that system back up again. And we did. And you high five for a couple of days, and then that thing goes upside down on you for God knows what reason, but it does. And I'd say that's an exceptional moment. And I say that because we have not been really tested.
no,
And I don't want to
we
see
have
our young
not.
people tested and tried, and have some good times from it, and be able to walk away from that tested event and with some pride and ownership. And Nate, I say this like I'm never going to see you again, dear brother. Um, we've only got a little time left here
Yeah,
to get this right, okay? And in all brutal honesty of it, when the clock is up on each of us, we're going to be at that moment where we don't need to have resentment or regret in our heart, and we've really got to put out everything we've got for our next generations. And I
yeah,
say that respectfully. I've lost friends in this chip war. I've got one friend I've lost, and I loved him like a dear family member. And he believed right up to his last breath in everything that we're doing right now. And these people out here burning buildings, these people out here doing these awful things, they will never. And this isn't going to happen for them until they are starving, and they are getting a Bunsen burner to get $3 worth of chips off of a board in a junkyard. They're not going to appreciate this moment and what we're saying until that time, God forbid, ever happens. And so I say what I do with
yeah,
a tenacious amount of vigor, and I say it with love in my heart. And there's a lot of things that I'm sitting here reading about all of this, and the questions you had and things, and some of these things we might not have addressed, but all in all, that in any time of the day of the week you can call me, and I'll be here because this
yeah.
is this
Well,
is
I'm definitely going to talk to you some more about this, because one of the things that happened to me is, I ran for Congress and I didn't win, but it was the best experience I could have had, because it enlightened me to, number one, a lot of the problems, but also to a lot of the great innovators. As I was out there talking to people and meeting people, I met some really amazing people that are doing some phenomenal things. I met a guy, young guy, college grad, him and his business partner. They invented just an amazing new formula, a natural formula of fertilizer that works way better than anything that, is currently being produced, but it also inoculates the soil. It's all natural. There's no contamination problems like you have with a lot of the fertilizers. But you know how he got to start? Him and his buddy were in college and they were trying for their thesis. They were trying to figure out a way to take basically to create the basis for a semiconductor that is
Really?
made, yes, but that is made from compost. And I got to introduce you to this guy, because this is the kind of stuff where we're going to find new solutions to things that nobody's thinking about. But I mean, like, I met guys like that. I met another guy whose father had worked on developing, we got all these problems with our water here in West Virginia, and you've got problems with contamination of forever chemicals. And this guy's father invented, basically, he created these enzymes that you can basically inoculate the soil with, and it will eat tetrachloroethylene and turn it into I think it's polyvinyl chloride, and then they put in another one that eats that, and it produces like chlorine, and then they put something else in there and it produces water, and basically the byproduct is I think methane or something like that. And so they're using these innovative ways of solving problems that that people aren't, they're just not doing. And so we got to get those kinds of minds together and solve some of these problems. But this chip thing, I think, would be very interesting. I think you would really enjoy, talking with these young guys, and brilliant guys. There's another guy I know in San Francisco, and I won't say his name because he's a conservative in hiding. but the guy is brilliant. He's got several patents, and he has created a way of computing that is completely different than anything. I mean, it is literally an unhackable way of computing. So like it's like zero trust, but different than anything I've ever seen. And he's had the I think the what was it, naval intelligence has tried to give him a lot of money to buy this from him. He's like, no, I'm not. I don't want to sell this to you guys. But it's very interesting technology. And so I think those are the kinds of people that need to be communicating with each other and working and building bridges and coming up with solutions. But we're definitely going to have to talk later. And I want to, I'll make sure that I'll text you my number so that we can talk directly. But I just think that there's some great things that are going on, some great people that I've met. And sometimes I feel like an idiot, with these guys, because I mean, I consider myself pretty knowledgeable of a lot of things, but, cybersecurity is kind of my expertise. But I love to read, and I love to study, and I love to understand things. I always, my mind is always like wanting to understand, how things work, and which is what makes me a good engineer, because I've always been able to figure out problems by using deductive reasoning. But I think that's where we're at, and I agree with you. I think we have a real problem. I think we have a major problem in our education system. We need a pipeline that's going to basically move people in to these fields, and I do think that we need people that are going to work in the semiconductor industry, that are going to, go to work in hardware, not just in software. We need people that are going to, to work in a lot of these fields, and we need people that are willing to be entrepreneurs and that get there's a lot of smart people, but they can't figure out how to take that ingeniousness that they have and translate that in the area of business, or translate that in the area of, they don't know how to take something that is a brilliant idea. Maybe they've even created a prototype, but how do you take that to production? There's a gap there, and I think that's part of the problem. Right now, our tax laws, for example, are not conducive to entrepreneurs that are, sole proprietorships, right? They get, taxed like you wouldn't believe. So they, but people go into a business and they don't know these things. And so they don't start, an S corp, and they don't know all the little tax loopholes to help them out, so they're not, getting, raked over the coals by the IRS. So we got to figure out ways of, I think, preparing, not just teaching people the smart, the technological part, but we need to teach them, I think, the business part, and and give them some education in taxes, or at a minimum, educate them who to go talk to find out this information. Boy, I wish I would have learned some of those things before I got started in business. I had to learn through the school of hard knocks.
Yeah, we had to do that. So everybody else behind us can look and watch and not do what we did, right?
Exactly.
And I believe me, I've done that myself. I've had it and lost it and had to rebuild it all again.
Yep.
And I thank God that I've not everything had worked out like it did. I'm glad some things didn't, because I wouldn't be the person I'm sitting here before you right
That's
now
true.
with a big bowl of apple soup or whatever, humble pie.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be that guy. And
Yeah.
because you have to walk into this very humble, and you have to realize we have got to, take out the defibrillator and hit the patient, America, and jumpstart this country again. And we have to do it like they did in the Marshall Plan days. Like, you got to think Hoover Dam level of effort.
Yes.
You can't be
Absolutely.
over here thinking about, well, I just want to make this little picnic table, and maybe someone will show up and make a semiconductor factory. You have to think
Yeah.
about how are you going to structure workforce development on a regional level.
Yep.
Okay. And it's going to pull people in. You can't be sitting there going, like, I had people coming to me with like old abandoned shopping malls. And okay, that's fine. But, if you really know how a fab is designed, you're not going to go out here and spend money trying to cram a $6 million piece of equipment into an old shopping mall that does not have access to subwater, does not have access
Right.
to, creating clean rooms and all of that. So President Trump has got his work cut out for him. He's going to have to get a new banking cartel has to come in that's away from the people out here who's trying to minefield the
Yep.
geopolitical
All that ESG
scenario.
crap's got to go.
Yeah.
And I've actually, so here's, this is on that note, like, I've thought about this, like, yeah, the federal government can come up with solutions, but the states, they need to come up with solutions too. Like West Virginia itself, we have the capability of creating a state trust bank. And I've thought about, like, because I've been concerned about where the currency is going and about the US dollar, falling in value, and especially as we lose, the petrodollar and stuff like that. So we could build a system where we export $7 billion worth of goods out of West Virginia to other parts of the world. We could say, hey, if you pay your export taxes in gold and silver, we will cut you a 10% discount on your taxes, right? And we could soon fill up the treasury of West Virginia with actual real assets worth something.
Right.
And
right.
then, and then have that money, be an investment arm for other capital projects in West Virginia that we need. But it takes getting people on board with that and doing it. And why? So I say great. I think it's great. I think Trump should work on that, but I think the states need to come up with solutions too, because they could become a very powerful, like, if you wanted to build, say, you want to build a chip factory here in say West Virginia. All right. If West Virginia could guarantee you, a low interest rate loan, that has no ties to the federal government, but it's just the state, saying, hey, we're gonna basically give you we're gonna invest in your company so that you can build that here, and and we'll give you access to water, we'll give you access to the right materials under the ground, all that other stuff. We'll give you access to raw materials. We'll build we'll start mining operations so that we can take what you need out of the ground and deliver it directly to you. I mean, that's innovation at the state level, and you get the right people together, I think they could do it. Now, the one problem that we have here is, I think, of like workforce, and that's what you were just talking about. how do you develop that workforce so that by the time that plant is built, we've got the people ready to work in that plant? Is that something that needs to be working with the Board of Education, with our state, and say, hey, we need to develop, programs at all of our community colleges that are going to basically certify people and train them in so that they're ready to go work, in this, in these environments, in these different industries that we are going to invest heavily in our state.
Okay, well, with that said, Nate, what you have to do when you talk about workforce development, if it's mining or whatever the activity is, you need to have the official equipment manufacturer of the main pieces of equipment involved in that activity. You need to have them involved. And like if this was like farming, you'd want John Deere involved or whatever. Okay. So since this is mining, you want to make sure you've got CAT and all of these other companies involved that are doing.
You're gonna have repair guys
I think,
that can fix that stuff, right?
Yeah. So you want to have their engagement, their involvement, and their investments as well. And you want their cadre to be permanently stationed right there in that state, training those people, because employee retention is just as important as employees hired.
Right.
Okay. Because people are going to leave for one reason: get fired, get sick, get old, like me, just people are going to do whatever, and they're going to leave. So employee retention is important to do that. And also, as technologies get better, you want to have those technicians, from the OEMs there training you on the new stuff. Right. So cadre training, you have to look at, like I said, like a Hoover Dam build. You think all of those people out there knew how to pour concrete like they did?
No, they probably had a lot of, I'm sure they had to get a lot of OJT, for that type of work.
Yeah. So we got to get this going fast.
Yeah.
So again, I go back to mining, chemicals, the manufacturing aspects of this. I'm just talking about, building crystal core chambers, wafer development.
We've got massive, and that's why I was saying the Ohio River Valley, you got massive number of petrochemical companies that are on that river. You've got, you had a steel industry that was there that is pretty much gone now, but you got a lot of people that know how to do that kind of work. You have a lot of mining operations that are all throughout the state. So taking that infrastructure that does exist and retrofitting it for this new, type of industry, I think is something that could be done. I think it could be done. And
okay, now on a macro level,
sure.
Now, see, on a macro level, we don't have a lot of time.
No, we don't.
Okay, but we've got an intellectual gun to our head here to save our country. Okay, it's like the clock is ticking, and everybody goes, "Oh, midterms is." I'm not worried about midterms. Okay, there's 1,000 ways to skin this cat, and we can get it done in 4 years. We can get a lot of it done. We can probably be at the 75th percentile level if we stop the movie, stopped all of the craziness with everybody, and focused on getting things done, creating that bank, to decentralize all funding going into these activities. That way it insulates it. Start getting your OEMs engaged, just like they're coming. NVIDIA is showing up, Intel is showing up, everybody's showing up. They got like $2.7 trillion right now, and everybody's showing up. And okay, so everybody put your money into a pot. Let's develop a training cadre. Let's identify where we can train people in regional, whether it's Texas, over here in Georgia somewhere, pick like 5 places and get busy. Start building regional training academies. Technology, you call it technology resorts.
Yeah. Well, I like that idea. And I definitely want to talk to you some more about this and introduce you to some folks out here that I think have that same mindset and that are already working on some of those things. But I think there's a real potential in the Rust Belt, where there were a lot of hardworking people, that have lost a lot of the opportunities, over the years due to the EPA, quite frankly, and just mismanagement. But I think if there are some opportunities that arose, I think you would have, it would truly be as Trump calls it, a golden age, for the economy and for just the advancement of our country and helping to ensure that we're going to be able to not just survive a future, that looks, kind of scary, but one where we can stay ahead with the technology so that, we are advanced and we're able to keep, our enemies at bay, because we've got to have that technological advancement. That is a key component to our military strategy, to our defense strategies, making sure that we are ahead of everybody else, and I feel like we're losing that. And I think a lot of where we're losing that has been, in the fact that our youth don't have I think we've got some cultural problems that got to be fixed. And, but those cultural problems are not everywhere. They're not in every state, at least not to the same degree, and so that's where I think, like, some of these places that are, in West Virginia, Kentucky, other places where you have some of the rural areas, but you do have some industrial base that is already there. People want to get back to work. They want to learn, new technology, and I think they'd be happy to have good paying jobs. I think it would be a win-win. So, well, we're just about out of time here. We're at 2 hours, and I always like to give my guest the final word. We've talked about a lot of different things, and we didn't even get into all of the topics that I wanted to get into. We're going to have you back, because I want to, keep people up on what is happening and what trends are happening in this type of industry. So, but what do you want people who are listening to this? And we got 1,500 people right now live that are online listening. What do you want them to take away from our conversation?
Well, I would say,
Uh-oh. Shoot. The Chinese don't want you talking, Brian. So hold on. We'll wait here for a minute and see if we can get him back on. We lost him. Hopefully he'll jump back in. Let me give him a call. Hang on there, folks. Just give me 1 minute. We were talking about it at the beginning of the night, that he was talking about how he's had his website come under attack by the Chinese government because they're not happy about the kinds of things that he's doing. And I think that's very likely what is happening right now. So just give us a minute here. I'm going to give him a call and see if I can get him back on. Been an interesting night. We've talked about a lot of really important things, and we barely scratched the surface. These kinds of topics are so complicated and technical and involve a lot of they involve a lot of discussion in so many different areas: economics, education, technology, environment, natural resources. We've talked about a lot of different areas, but that's why these problems don't get solved so easily, because they're very complicated. So we've got to have good people who are able to, to dig into these things and solve these problems, and we need to remove the, obstacles and barriers that are in the way. So, folks, I'm going to see if I can try to get Brian back on. So just give me 1 moment here. Well, it looks like we may have lost Brian. I can't seem to get a hold of him, so I don't know what happened. It's radio silence, as Truthful Troll said. But folks, I will get him back on the show so that we can continue this conversation at another time in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and close up the show and close us out in prayer. I can tell you that the thing that I think is the most important to take out of this is that we have to become the masters of our own future. We cannot wait on the government to fix these problems. We need to be entrepreneurs. We need to be willing to start businesses. We need to be willing to learn new trades and to take those risks. And not everybody is built that way, but those of us that are, we should proceed forward and try to make a difference. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm hoping that that I will be successful. You know, it is a starting a business is not easy, and there's a lot of there's a major learning curve. But I would encourage any of you guys, and if you're, maybe you've somebody that you're not at the point where you want to start a business anymore, maybe you're retired, invest in those companies. Invest in those companies that are doing innovative things and new things, so that they don't have to become beholden to the BlackRocks and the State Streets and the Vanguards of the world. It's important that we support those companies and that we help to bring them, into our states. Talk to your state legislature, get them involved in some of these things. So anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close it out, and I'm going to close this out in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you for Brian and the things that he talked about tonight and the things that he's doing. I pray your blessing on him. I pray your blessing on everybody watching the show right now. Lord, I pray that you would help Trump and his leadership and our state legislators and our state governors to find solutions so that we can stay ahead of the game and so that the next generation will still get to live in the greatest nation on earth. Lord, we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. With that, folks, I want to thank you all for joining tonight and for listening. And I want to ask that you continue to stay vigilant and make sure and educate yourselves on these things. Don't leave it to the media to tell you, because they're not, but get those books. If you're like me, I don't have time to read a bunch of books. So I do a lot of listening. Every time I'm driving somewhere, I've got a book on tape and I'm listening to it. And I'm always trying to educate myself about different things. But remember to like and subscribe the show. Remember to follow me on Twitter and True Social and Getter and Gab and Facebook and anywhere you're at Nate Cain for WV. And you can find out what's going on if you missed a show and what's happened. I apologize for last Tuesday. I missed the show. We had a technical problem that kept us from being able to do it. So we've rescheduled last Tuesday's show for Sunday night. Oh, great. Brian is back on. I'm going to bring him back up. Hopefully he's able to get back up here. Brian, it looks like your video's still chiming. I'm seeing the spinning circle of death. There we go. Are you back? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I was just closing us out in prayer. And so I usually do the question before and then I go into prayer, but I didn't think I was going to be able to get you back. So I closed this out already. But why don't you go ahead and tell people what is the thing that you want people to take away from this conversation?
Well, the thing I want everyone to kind of remember is that we've already created laws for the CHIP Act and that kind of thing, and it was abused. And now we've got to take up what's left of this energy and we've got to apply that toward new initiatives that's really going to help onshore the entire industry, not pick a favorites kind of initiative, but onshore the whole industry where we're doing everything for ourselves in the United States. And I mentioned all the other major topics of that being, the mining, manpower, manufacturing, chemical industry, packaging, all of it. It's all or nothing right now. Yeah. And if we don't get this right, it's going to be next 30 years. It's going to be awful.
What can our guests do to help with that effort? Is it best for them to reach out to their Congress members, to their state legislators? What should they be telling them?
They should be demanding that we onshore the industry and deregulate the chemical industry. And also, a lot of these Superfund sites, they need to be reassessed for value as far as can small businesses come in and actually set up shop in some of these Superfund sites. That
Right.
has to be done. I mean, aggressively, because some of these places are over evaluated. And
Let's have, you know what, in fact, that's an important part. I don't think people even understand what that is, and unfortunately, we don't have the time to get into that tonight. But I do know what that is, and I 100% agree with you. So I'm going to tell Jeanette, I want to have you on again. And you know, I was saying after you got cut off there that this kind of a conversation is so complicated because it involves economics, it involves technology, it involves energy, it involves you know, regulations and the environment and all of these different areas that have to be tackled. So, but the Superfund thing's an interesting thing. So I want to talk to you offline about that, and maybe we can put together, you know, do a few shows to educate people, because I don't think a lot of people are educated about a lot of this stuff, and I think it would be good for them to have a better understanding and bring it down to, you know, simplistic you know, kind of layout for them, so that they know then how to talk to their legislators and know how to get engaged with them, because that's part of the problem. Like before I ran for office, I had no idea about most of this stuff. I learned it because I had to speak to it at, you know, at campaign stops, and I didn't want to be an idiot and not talk about, you know, talk about something I didn't know about. So I educated myself. I learned. I studied. I became an expert in a lot of things that I didn't know about beforehand. And I think that human beings, we have that capability. So we need to kind of provide them some education on that. But I think that would be a great, to start with, where can people follow you? Are you on social media? What's the website for your organization?
well, in all honesty, the Chinese have obliterated my website, and so I have got to actually work on getting the American Industrial Compact website back up and running again. They've done such a wonderful job at putting a lot of unpleasant pictures all over it. So I'm going to have to repair that. But you can contact me by Brian_Long@mail.com and start out there.
That's awesome.
I'm open for business 24/7. I don't take breaks or holidays or anything. But you know, this part, Nate, this is going to be an adventure, and I think that, you know, if we lighten up a little bit about, you know, the doom and gloom stuff, I think we're going to be okay. And
I think you're right.
You know, and we got to take care of each other going through this.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Well, folks, it's been a great night. Brian, thank you so much for being on here, and thank you for sharing this information. I'm really excited to talk with you and get to know you more and share, you know, share ideas and dream, because I think that's half of it right there, is to be able to think outside that box and think about how we can, you know, better our communities, our states, our country. And I've got a lot of ideas, and I would love to share some of those with you and get your thoughts on it. So
sure.
we will definitely, I'll probably call you, you know, maybe this weekend and chat with you about it. But folks, stay engaged, stay strong, educate yourselves. Like I said, you know, I'm the type of person, I don't have time necessarily to read, you know, 10 books, but I can listen to 10 books. And so every time I'm driving somewhere, I got a book on tape that I'm listening to, and I'm constantly educating myself. If there's something you don't know, learn about it. If it interests you at all, and then bring your ideas to people. You know, talk to the Brian Longs of the world, talk to others. If you're somebody that maybe you're not, you know, maybe you're not the person that to start a company or to be an entrepreneur, but maybe you know, maybe you're at that age where you've got some money and you want to invest it in these companies that are innovating, so that they don't have to become slaves to the, you know, to the big three and to, you know, some of these hedge funds, so that they don't have to sell off the ownership of their company, but they can actually do something. And you know, it takes investment, and we've got to invest in our own, you know, our own country, and invest in those companies that are doing things in our own country. So I want to thank everyone for joining. God bless you, and God bless America. Have a great day.
God bless you too, Nate.
Raise some cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors. no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.